Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Metro Board activities for January 12th, 2023. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Teresa Impastato, our Chief Safety Officer, to provide us with today's safety contact. Good morning, Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year and welcome to Metro headquarters. In the event of an alarm activation, we'll exit this conference room via the glass doors and proceed into the lobby where we'll await further instructions from the security team. If we are instructed to exit the building, I will lead the group to the assembly point at the adjacent Hancock Park, and the security team will coordinate with responders. There's an AED located at the front desk. In the event of a medical emergency, I'll retrieve the AED and render aid while the front desk contacts responders. Lastly, restrooms are located in the vestibule area adjacent to this conference room. Metro has over 600 escalators to allow our customers to travel throughout the system, including the longest escalator in the Western Hemisphere. We hope our customers enjoy the convenience of escalators, but wish to remind them to treat them with respect. When riding on an escalator, stand facing forward and hold the handrail. Hold small children by the hand. Don't allow children to sit or play on an escalator. If your child is in a stroller, do not use an escalator. Use the elevator instead. Stand clear of moving parts, keeping your hands, feet, and clothing clear of the side panels of the escalator. Make sure to secure any loose shoelaces that could become caught in moving parts of the escalator. And be sure to exit promptly from an escalator. Never stop or stand at an escalator landing, as this can cause a dangerous pileup. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to today's Metro Board meeting activities and to the meeting of the Board's Executive Committee. And before we start and call the roll, I'd like to turn the floor over to our General Manager, Randy Clark, for a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think before we start the meeting, I just wanted to take a moment to address, another tragic situation that happened yesterday in the district, in our region, and unfortunately touched Metro. A shooting, 3 individuals are involved. Many of you saw the media last night about it, and obviously we sent some information to the board. I want to just say how, I've said it multiple times since I've been here, just how sickening, quite frankly, the gun violence is, how deplorable it is, how it's unacceptable, how as a community we need to figure out how to come together and stop this, and that's on a national, regional, and district level. I also want to really reassure our staff and our customers that I, as the general manager, and I know this board and our senior executive team, your safety is the most paramount thing we think about every day. It's the number one thing I personally think about every day I wake up and I go to bed. And I want to just take a moment and really acknowledge our staff, what they did last night. Not only did our police officers, as usual, show up quickly, do a great job in working with our partners at MPD, but our bus operator, she saw what was happening, quickly got the victims plus others that were in danger back on that bus, quickly moved that bus several blocks, and got those individuals to safety, and then medics and police were able to go to the new location of the bus and then transport and look after those victims. That's the incredible people that work at Metro day in and day out and serve the community. So I just want to thank her and thank all the staff and just reassure everyone that we believe Metro's safe. We are doing everything humanly possible with police, video, with compassion, with our crisis counselors. We have an epidemic of gun violence in this country, and unfortunately, from time to time, those random acts spill onto Metro. But I want to reassure everyone that your safety is what we think about every single day, and we are doing everything to make the system as safe as possible. So thank you, Chair, for a few moments of that.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And again, on behalf of the board, want to recognize staff, and particularly our police force, for the work that they did and the coordination with the district's police force during the incident last night. So it is really tragic, and hopefully, some good can come out of it ultimately. So thank you. Now I'll turn to the board corporate secretary, Ms. Ellison, to call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Smedberg.
Present.
Vice Chair Babers.
Present.
Mr. Goldman.
Present for secretary reports this morning.
Ms. Klein.
Present.
Mr. Letourneau.
Present.
Dr. Lowe.
Present.
Mr. Drummer.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Does anyone have any objections or comments on the agenda? If not, we'll now consider the agenda approved as presented. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have minutes of our December 8th meeting before us for approval. Do we have any comments or objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have two items before us today, both follow-ups to presentations previously given to this committee. First, the committee is being asked to authorize the formal public hearing process for the draft strategic transformation plan, Your Metro, the Way Forward. Over the past several months, staff has met with numerous stakeholders across the region for their input and feedback on the plan. Today's action will allow Metro to conduct outreach directly with the public and incorporate their feedback when seeking approval of the final plan in late February. Next, staff from the Better Bus Network Redesign Project will review the feedback they received during the project's final round of, actually it's the first round of outreach, I think, right, Allison? Board members may recall that in late September, the board approved the project's guiding principles that established a framework for its approach, including its information gathering and decision-making processes. We're excited to have them back today before us to find out what they've heard when talking to our bus riders and other stakeholders. Next, we'll go on, and Kimmy, good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me today. All right. My name is Kimmy Feldbauer. I'm a Strategic Transformation Project Manager and here to request authorization for the public hearing process on the Strategic Transformation Plan for Metro, the Way Forward. The purpose of this plan is to guide Metro's strategy and actions over the next 5+ years. And then today's purpose of request is that we would like to authorize a public hearing process to gather regional input from customers and stakeholders across the region to incorporate feedback into a final plan, which will then come back to request adoption from the board. The public will have the opportunity during the public hearing process to review the strategic transformation plan that lays out Metro's mission and vision and identifies our goals, objectives, and initiatives, which is how we'll activate the plan to achieve the mission and vision. Everything is supported by our core values on the screen, in which we briefed the last time I was here. Together with the board, staff, and community, robust input has shaped the development of the plan and the draft plan that you have reviewed and that the public will have the opportunity to review over the next few weeks. Incorporated into the plan was input through surveys, performance data, social media data, interviews, community forums, workshops, prior studies and reports, and staff forums to develop this plan. Community engagement was a critical piece of the planning process over the last 5 months. We conducted over 60 interviews across the enterprise and including customers and the board members. We had over 2,600 respondents to our customer survey, almost 3,500 responses to our staff survey, conducted several community engagement meetings across the region, out on stations and bus platforms to engage with our customers in the moment of their journey and understand how we can better provide support to them as a customer of Metro. Conducted several Metro staff town halls where we heard from thousands of employees on their experience here at Metro and how we can engage them to further develop the strategic plan. We met with over 100 government partners, business leaders, advisory committees, and advocates to align their priorities and make sure that we are capturing their needs for Metro. And lastly, we also conducted several workshops with the board and senior executive staff to develop the framework of the plan, which was then developed through strategic input from our customers, from our staff. We are on schedule with the plan, and right now we're getting ready to host that public hearing with the authorization of the board to garner feedback from the public, which we will then incorporate into the final draft of the plan to hopefully adopt in later February or earlier March. And then once the plan is adopted, we will be coming back on an ongoing basis, reporting out on our progress against the initiatives and goals that we have laid out in the plan. Some upcoming milestones after today. If we have authorization for the public hearing, we have a tentative hold to host that public hearing in early February. The public comment period will open on January 21st and be open for a few weeks, closing on February 14th, and then come back with a final plan that incorporates all of the public input in late February. Feedback opportunities for the public include that public comment period. The plan will be translated into Spanish and any other language will be available upon request. The Metro webpage will be our primary method for collecting feedback where the public, our stakeholders, customers, staff can submit written comments and upload documents via feedback tool that will be available on the website. And the proposed hybrid public hearing will be held on February 9th in Virginia with an opportunity for people to participate in person or attend virtually or be able to call in. And then registration will be included in the link so that people can speak and share the hearing. Is the end of this presentation open to any questions or comments from the committee?
Thank you, Kimmy. Any comments or questions for Ms. Feldbauer? Okay. Well, Kimmy, thank you for all the work thus far and appreciate all the input that we've had from folks. So I'll go ahead and put a motion on the table. Is there a second from a committee member?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Klein. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers,
Aye.
Mr. Goldman,
Aye.
Ms. Klein.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kimmy.
Thank you.
And would obviously encourage the public to, participate or send in comments. Next, we'll have an information item on the Better Bus network redesign.
Terrific. Happy
morning.
New Year, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Peter and I are pleased to be back here on behalf of the Better Bus Network redesign team, who've been working super hard to get to where we are right now, and we're looking forward to this briefing. As discussed, we'll be talking about, as that was our first round of engagement back in the fall, and we'll be updating on what we heard, as well as a lot of the work that we did in terms of existing conditions on the current system and what we know about travel patterns that are happening in the region and what that means to what we can be doing better and better connecting. So where we are in the project, we're about a third of the way done, and we are still aiming to have draft networks finalized by the end of this calendar year. That means that we'll be out again in April and May with actual networks, and I know that all of us are really excited to dig into and figuring out where service should go and how quickly, how often, and the frequency and the span of service. So point being is that we are working with the jurisdictional partners on that right now, and we'll be back in April and May to talk to the public and many of our stakeholders. So again, customer and audience engagement. In October, November, we were out, and like I said, we were out. We had about 18 different pop-up events, 10 different bus stop chats, and we talked to almost 10,000 people at the bus stop chats and interactions. We've also had listening sessions with elected officials at all the bus divisions to hear from operators because they know the service extraordinarily well. And then we've been meeting with community organizations, business leaders, and the like to really hear what they need bus service to be. So again, we've got a monthly e-newsletter that hopefully you're all receiving. We also did some creative outreach by partnering with the transit app to push the survey out to people so that as people are riding the bus or looking into riding the bus, they're knowing that survey is available. We were out thanks to our communications team, act very actively on social media in Spanish and in English. And then we've been doing a lot of other work internally with our employees as well. So what did we hear? I think first and foremost, and this was universal, whether it was a survey, whether it was those interactions at the pop-ups and bus stop chats, but about 45% of the respondents noted that service is very good or excellent, right? So that really tells us that, you know, we don't need to throw everything out and draw everything again. It is, we want to be thoughtful about what we're proposing and where those opportunities are for improvement. Also notes that about, on the same scale, 42% said fair, right? So fair is kind of, some days it's great, some days it could be better. So really trying to like drill into what that information is telling us. And what we really heard, and again, this is across all different ways that we were engaging customers, the shorter wait time, so frequency of service, and that arriving on time reliability, those were the two things that across the board really came out loud and clear. Obviously, safety, as the general manager responded to, that has become, and I think back to for bus transformation, that the safety element has increased in people's thoughts about what bus needs to be. But those are all things that we're focused on as we think about the redesign. So again, because it wasn't just a survey, we had a lot of like one-on-one interactions, or Peter and I did a lot of listening sessions. We really heard, from our operators, that the reliability helps them as well, right? They need the breakpoints at the end. They want to be on schedule, right? So it's how do we think about the benefits to better reliability and how we're scheduling service that helps them as much as it helps the customers. And then finally, those opportunities to build that transparency and increasing efforts with our jurisdictional partners, just to make what we do and what they do work better together. So all of that helped us put together what we think a vision for the better bus network would be, and really thinking about what a great network is. So just wanted to really highlight as we think about what that network will be, we are building two networks, right? One is visionary, that really gets to a lot of these things that I think we all want to see in a great bus system. That will, not surprisingly, require more resources, but that gets us to that, we're calling it a visionary network to meet the needs of customers in the region. We're also working under the same resources that we have to restructure the bus network, building on things like the frequent service network that we launched, I was going to say last year, but in 2021. And so really building on a lot of things that we know have been working since we've launched them, and then making some better choices on that. So, great bus system. What does that tell us, right? What we heard is it needs to go when and where people are traveling. So that's that regional connectivity piece that we're actually connecting to places when and where people want to go. The frequent, reliable service, so getting that quality customer and operator experience. And then finally, we know transportation is the ladder of opportunity for people. And so it is that ladder to get up. It is the opportunity to move up the economic ladder. So making sure that bus is doing its role and playing its part in addressing inequities to provide that access to opportunity. So ultimately, yes, it is to transport more customers, creating safer streets, improving air quality, but it's got to do those basic things really well to make sure that we're getting there. I'm going to turn this over to Peter.
Thank you, Allison. So I'm going to drill a little down into some of the data that we have gotten so far, and how we're going to work to use it as we plan the network. So first of all, we need to understand where people are actually traveling in the region. We are using data that actually looks at all trips, so not just existing transit trips, but walking, driving, and basically any way getting around the region. This graphic shows in the large blue circle represents all the travel in the region. Some of those trips are just never going to be transit competitive. They're either one end or the other is in a very rural area, or they could also be very short trips that are going literally one bus stop down the street, something like that. But we believe that about 10 million trips in the region, and these numbers are pre-COVID numbers, so they're 2019. We are also getting now current data that we will look at, but we think the overall number of trips is pretty similar, and these 10 million trips that we think could be made by transit. They are served on both ends of the trips, but in many cases, it's really indirect to get from one to the other, but in theory, we could restructure the network to try to compete for those trips. Of those, we are, at least in 2019, we're capturing about 10% of those, about 1 million trips, about half of that on the bus. Lower on the weekends, so we were doing less good on weekends. But as you can see, there's a lot of room for us to grow. We probably will never get all of those trips that could be made by transit, but there's a lot that we can do to make the system better and more better for the riders who are currently on it, as well as grow the market. We need to look at when people are traveling, and this is perhaps a key area that we can do better. About a little less than half of 2019 trips were during peak periods, but that means that a little more than half were not during peak periods. Those are, but our service is more and was more aligned towards the peak trips. This was particularly noticeable on weekends. The graphic on the right, just to walk you through it, the green represents the decrease in trips compared to a weekday on a Saturday and Sunday. So while there are fewer trips on Saturday and Sunday, it's not that much fewer than on a weekday. It's about down 10% on Saturday, a little more on Sunday. But the blue bar represents, back in 2019, how much our weekend service, Saturday and Sunday on bus, decreased compared to a weekday service. On Sunday, we were down over 50%. We did a significant course correction in 2021 with our restructuring with the frequent service network, so that's the light blue bars, still not nearly aligned with where the actual ridership is, but a significant improvement. We want to build on that. So a redesigned network is really going to work towards improving that balance. We also need to understand why people are traveling. So we do have a lot of trips for people going to work, but not surprisingly, particularly given that last graphic, a lot of trips for other locations besides work. Particularly, for example, shopping and medical and other needs. In equity-focused communities, even people working, they're 35% more likely to be commuting on weekends than on weekdays. So there's a lot that we can dig into that data, and again, redesign the network to better accommodate multiple trip purposes. We also are looking at where we are actually having stops, and here, and access points to the bus network. Here, the story is on the top level is pretty good. 74% of our region's residents, or the compact area's residents, live within a quarter mile of a bus stop. But in many cases, that bus stop might not have frequent service, might not have the span of service that we need to have. About 22% of residents live near high frequency service during the rush hours. That number drops down a bit on middays and weekends. We have had success where we invested in frequent bus service. Those services have actually increased faster than the other routes. So we know that frequency does matter. And so we will try to bring more frequent service to as many people as we can in this effort. We also are looking at the entire trip. So it's not just on the bus, but it's getting to the bus, where the bus stop is, condition of the bus stops, transfer points, how that environment is. We may, in this redesign, introduce transfers that might not exist now in order to get more frequent service, but we want to make sure that those transfer points are as seamless as possible, as safe and attractive as possible, and not just, on the side of a highway, unpaved road or something like that. So we will be looking at that. We do know also that it really depends on the the length of the trip for certain characteristics. So for people going short distances, want a bus to come as frequently as possible. A limited stop bus for a short distance really doesn't help significantly. Having lots of branches and things like that ends up being confusing and not really getting people where they want to go. For longer distance trips, though, there is some benefit for an express or limited stop service, and there may be cases where we do have branches. So we are looking at that and trying to consider that during the redesign. Reliability is, I think, Allison, you mentioned before, is a key point as well, and this is where we continue to work with our jurisdictional partners on transit priority. We have significant projects in all three jurisdictions, and we'll continue to work with that. The network redesign works both ways, so we will try to get more of our existing services into existing priority areas where it makes sense, and we will identify areas where additional priority would be very helpful and work with our partners to do that. The redesigned network will actually have that priority, have more reliability, because we will be able to get the buses through and around traffic congestion. And as was mentioned before, equity is a part of this from the beginning of the project through to the end. I mentioned that 35% more likely equity communities to commute on weekends. They actually are more likely right now to live near high-frequency service, and I think that's a testament partly to the ridership being very high in those areas, but also, again, the frequent service that we implemented a year and a half ago was really targeted particularly towards improving service in equity-focused communities. So we've improved it, but we still have a ways to go. And one of those is to try to bring people closer to jobs and other opportunities. And so that's, again, an improved network is going to take that into account. There will be trade-offs that we'll have to make, even in the aspirational network, the visionary network. We are going to work through some of the trade-offs that other network redesigns have looked at, is having service on every possible street versus concentrating and having more frequent service on some major streets. Having routes that connect all different points together versus maybe having more frequent service but transfer locations to increase the reach that way. And bus stops. Every time a bus pulls over to stop, it is slowing down the bus for everyone else, but it is providing closer access to people who are actually using that stop. So we will be looking at all the bus stops and trying to make the best balance of that in this network. As was mentioned, we will in April and May have a lot of public outreach about our first concept plans that we'll be showing. And that's where we'll begin to get into discussion with the public as well as stakeholders, as well as all of you, on those trade-offs and get feedback. That will be as much effort as we put into the outreach we did in the fall. This will be an even more intense and more complex outreach, because there's a lot of detail and a lot of the region, and people will very much care about their specific areas, but also, people do travel throughout the region. So that will be a challenge. We are actually talking to a number of our colleagues in other cities who are steps ahead of us in this process on how their successes and failures in communicating that. So we are trying to learn lessons from that as well. Finally, there are other factors that we will build in as we are doing this. I mentioned some of them about the bus stop facilities and transfer facilities that we'll try to work towards. Cleanliness on vehicles, that was an item that came up in a number of our communications and touch points in the fall. The legibility and intuitiveness of the system itself. We're a system with a Route 7Y and a Route Y7 and a Route 70. A lot of that's historical reasons and not necessarily intuitive to potential customers or customers outside of their local area and familiarity. So this is an opportunity to try to work on that and to just look at the priority and the scheduling and everything in the network. So concluding, as Allison talked about, our goal right now is to develop the visionary network, really what the region needs. And we're working with our partners in each of the jurisdictions and their networks. As a reminder, we're also doing a redesign as part of this study with the Prince George's County Bus Network, as well as the City of Fairfax queue system. And then we are also participating in Montgomery County's Ride On Reimagined network redesign in Montgomery County and really coordinating with them, and then working with all the other jurisdictions and their operators to really identify where service needs to happen. Initially, regardless of who operates it, it's really where do our customers, our collective customers, need service. And then simultaneously, we'll try to come up with something that's more feasible to implement right away. And you will begin to see that in a few months. Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Peter and Allison. I'll go ahead and we'll open it up to questions and comments from committee members. Deputy Mayor Babers, do you have any comments or questions?
I don't have any questions other than to thank you all for, once again, a great presentation.
Mr. Goldman? You're on mute, Michael.
No questions this morning, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Peter, I have one question for you. You said how, on I think it was slide 15, how and why people are using the bus. Work, school, daily errands, medical. Does that change your definition of peak moving forward? How, given the environment and everything that we're dealing with right now, is there a definition of peak anymore? And if so, what is it? Or are we staying with the traditional, 6 to 9, 4 to 7?
It's a good question. First of all, there is still a peak. I mean, we do on both bus and rail still see peaks. And the peaks, because they were more suppressed during pandemic, are the areas that are growing, even more so now as people come back to work and school. But it is definitely, it differs by day of week more so than it used to. And I think you're right that it may also be more spread out. And it's particularly in the PM where you have an overlap between many different trip purposes. So it's something we will definitely look at and really see, are we aligned schedule-wise and service-wise with what needs to be out there. And we're doing that on the rail as well as on the bus. We're continuing to follow that.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can, Chair, I just want to add a comment to what Peter's saying. I think we have to especially expect that probably a little bit more on the rail side than the bus side. That's not to say there won't be a little bit of tweaking on the bus side, but it's very clear Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are higher ridership days, not just here at Metro, everywhere in America. And we may be even more so depending on the type of region that we are. So the team is already looking at, and we're looking at, as we get our 7Ks, as we get more staffing, what it might look like to put more service on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday first before 5-day. We are really trying to come out of this COVID hole of staffing and our 7K issue. And we have to deliver the most amount of service where people are, to not only from a safety crowding point of view, but for demand. So I think that's a great question, Chair. Other agencies we're following very closely. New York and Toronto have made some adjustments already. Boston's made some. This network redesign, we'll think through that. We didn't purposely put that in the FY24 budget because, quite frankly, we're in the rebuild of the entire system. But some of the additive service on that might be, again, targeted. So, but I think great insight, and that's something we're going to have to watch closely and think about how the region recovers. And it goes to, the mayor was talking about the other day about federal employees as well. And we got, if these things are going to be long lasting, we're going to have to adjust as well.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure as we do these check-ins that we're on the same page for what we should expect at the end of this process. So according to the timeline, you're January, February, March, you're in the phase of developing network options. So what exactly does that mean, and what should we expect after you've developed network options?
So, right, so right now, we are working with all the jurisdictions we had workshops before the holidays of, all right, what are the connections we should be making? What are the corridors that need bus service? And then working through level of frequency. Is that, all day, all week service? Is it, so like what you should expect to see in April and May are like network maps with essentially bus networks on there, right?
But not necessarily route proposals that would come at the end of the process?
So it will look like it'll be a bus network with bus routes on it. It will, in some cases, look probably very similar to what's there. In some, certainly in terms of streets of operation, the major streets, Wisconsin Avenue or Columbia Pike will almost certainly have bus service in this proposal, right? But exactly where those connections are, the directness of routings in certain cases, it would be premature to even speculate. I know my staff is right now working with our consultants, and they have a lot of ideas and years of experience with those routes, coming up with proposals and concepts and looking at the data to see, where we're missing or having.
So one thing I just want to make sure we don't lose focus on, because it was a key factor when we launched this at the beginning, was also a more efficient network. Not just adding service, but looking at places where there's duplicate, looking at places that we have some lines that basically mirror rail lines completely at a time when we're trying to get rail ridership back. And then obviously figuring out, we have some really robust regional systems out there that other people operate, which routes are appropriate for WMATA to have versus those operators, and whether that balance today is what it should be. So is that all still on the table and
Yes.
part of the discussion?
So yeah, so what's up there are two things. One, that visionary, where do we need to go? But also the restructuring, so that there is something that could be implemented in 2025 under existing resources. The network, these two networks that show up in April and May, they will be operator agnostic, right? We want to focus on the connections. We want to focus on where we need service and where customers and the region need those connections, not about who's operating, who's paying, all of that. That will come, as we all know. But we wanted to make sure that the first unveiling of that is really focused on the needs and the opportunity that bus provides to the region.
Thank you.
And Ms. Klein, if I could have a follow-up on that, Allison. So the constrained network with the same resources, does that become the base for the visionary network, or are you adding on other things that may change things in that constrained network?
The goal, this will be challenging, and we're not there yet, but the goal that actually we discussed as a team yesterday is to have these two aligned with each other, so that you basically one builds on the other. Probably we will start with the visionary, what things should be there, and then figure out how to get to something that's the essential part of that's within our existing resources. But that's what we're working on. We want to make this as easy to communicate as possible, so we don't really want to, it would be not good to have radically different ones between them.
Right, but okay.
But it's to start visionary and work backwards as opposed to start here and go forwards.
I'm just wondering if there's anything that potentially they're in conflict with each other, or aspects of it are in conflict with each other. Yeah.
I guess my comment on that would be the only natural conflict is funding.
Funding.
Right, so it's not about the technical.
Always a conflict.
Well, but meaning it's not a technical bus conflict. It'll be, so the idea we want to really show is, pretend we spend $5 on bus. Here's the best way now to spend the $5 on bus.
Oh yeah, get it.
But here's what the region really needs, and that might cost $8. and then what do we all want to do? And then if we can't do 8, then you can work you back to 7 or to 6, but you can't really go 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're really trying to get what the whole region should look like. And to Board Member Letourneau's point, we as a region got to come together on this regional network. We should be completely customer focused. The customer shouldn't, in my opinion, there shouldn't be different bus signs at different providers. Everything should be using the same app. Everything should be the same payment system. Everything should be easy, because most of our customers are going from system to system, and we want to make it getting vehicles off the road and getting more people on transit should be our regional goal. And that's kind of part of what Peter and Allison laid out at the start. So that is the metro and the transit network we want to be as a region.
Thank you. I just have one question, one comment. I'm curious, in thinking about the network redesign, at the end of the day, do you have a set of metrics that you're looking to use to assess whether we've gotten to a great network? Like, I know I've seen some of the things in the presentation, access to frequent service, how many people are living near a bus stop at all. Can we sort of expect at the end of the day that we'll see a list of metrics so we can kind of judge what are we getting to?
Yes. So we've got that regional connectivity, customer and operator experience, and equity mirror our goals, right? We've got objectives and we've got metrics. So some of those metrics are, percent of residents, jobs, and residents by different demographic, different groups, within a quarter mile of bus service, within a quarter mile of frequent bus service. There is revenue hours in dedicated or prioritized right-of-way, right? We have access to key locations, which is, work, but it's also grocery stores, hospitals, education facilities. So, and it's within, I think it's within 45 minutes, within 30 minutes. So yes, we've got a long list of metrics, and we're currently working through that now as to how to, where do we really want to target? Because we could measure. And frankly, that's what, the past couple months have been setting everything up. What are the dashboards? How do we think through all the data that we have? And now the question is like, all right, how do we help tell this story? Because there is so much data and it gets incredibly confusing, even to us, as to how to make that clearer to customers and to other audiences. So yes.
Great, that's perfect. I look forward to seeing those in a nice, clear, understandable way once you figure out how to do that. And actually, just a comment on that, I thought the kind of spectrum with the trade-offs, that's an excellent way of illustrating that, and I think it just made it really clear. I'm really excited to see, this is my comment, I'm really excited to see that you're doing both a constrained and a visionary plan, because we need both. We need to understand what both of those are, and if there have been bus network redesigns around the country that have kind of started from the premise that, oh, we're not going to have any more money to spend, so we just have to figure out how we can be more efficient. Still a good goal, still an improvement to the bus systems that have led to increased ridership, but let's see if we can do more. So I look forward to seeing that as well, and I hope that you really are able to be very visionary in that redesign. Thanks. Thank you.
Dr. Leff.
First, thank you so much for this presentation. I think when we first started this process, there were several board members that said, I want frequent updates. And so I just appreciate, I feel extremely heard, and this feels very responsive to what the board has been asking for. So that's phenomenal, and thank you. Just a few kind of thoughts about how public input is informing this process versus how data is informing this process. We have to think regionally about efficiency and maximizing ridership. We have to think bigger than the existing system and our existing bus stakeholders, right? Going after those 10 million trips that are not currently taken by transit because traffic is terrible. So that's the right way to think about this, but we won't receive any public input from those 10 million travelers that aren't currently using the system, or we'll probably receive very little input from them. We'll receive a lot of input from current stakeholders who are trying to drag those trade-off sliders all the way to the left about their particular bus route. I'm just remembering like the public comments that we got on the budget. Last year, there was like an avalanche of, I read every single comment, and there was an avalanche of letters about specific bus routes, schedules, like wanting stuff back that does not align with the goals of this project. So we can't do this just based on input, but in order to have something that people can really buy into at the end, that means we need to give the public a lot of visibility into the data that's also driving this. So it sounds like you guys are thinking about how to provide that visibility. That's phenomenal. I personally can't wait to see it, but it's really important that so many more stakeholders than the board see it. We are just like a conduit through which this needs to pass to many, many people. Because we have to think regionally, and that means we have to think realistically about the role of input, of different inputs in the process. One stakeholder that I didn't hear explicitly mentioned was the District of Columbia Public School System. So, like, obviously kids go to school 5 days a week and not just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And their demand is extremely peaky. And the district relies on WMATA to be our school transportation provider. So I know that WMATA and DCPS have a standing meeting, coordinate planning, are always talking to each other. Council does not know that. DCPS parents don't know that. Nobody knows that. You guys are doing the right thing, but the public needs visibility into that as a part of this process as well, just so that everyone can be reassured that we're not forgetting that there's a population of people, none of whom can legally drive, who have extremely non-elastic demand to get between origins and destinations that we are here to serve and that we're getting paid to serve. So we just need to provide visibility into that and to reassure everyone that that's happening as part of this process.
Thank you for that. Number of points. First of all, I absolutely agree, and that's why we showed that slide, that it's actually 10 million is the universe that's, we believe, competitive. 1 million or so we get already, so it's about 9 million trips that we could do better with. And we have tried in our outreach to reach non-riders as well. So we've done pop-ups, events at, not just at a bus stop, but at a farmer's market, for example. And we have engaged with people. But I absolutely agree with your thoughts on that subject. And we will continue to do that and work to figure out how we can, in a understandable way, get the data out as well. In terms of the students, that's something we heard in our outreach, particularly with stakeholders, to figure out how to engage youth. There are challenges with that from a legal perspective about us directly engaging people under 18, but we know that's a significant group that we are working to talk with, and the schools are, and I think that goes to the general manager's comment that bus is more of a 5-day a week and actually a 7-day a week, but the 5 days because of school, we do work with the schools, and it's we will continue to do that and incorporate that into this this planning as well. Did you?
I was going to say, to follow up on that, Dr. Lowe, that we are planning some focus groups for the phase 2 to really get, because it takes a while to get ramped up as to what we're looking at and to get that youth engagement, but that's how we're factoring in there. And then we're also working with other youth-oriented organizations, as well as our MPPD. They've got their youth advisory, I think it's Youth Advisory Council, so again, working with them. So that's kind of where we're going for phase 2 and 3. To really, because your comment came out loud and clear when we talked to a number of other audiences in the district, especially.
Right, and then also just like getting the lottery data from DCPS when it's done, because it's not going to be like a mystery, like what the demand is. We're going to know the origin and destination of every public school student in the district.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Drummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, like fellow board members, I'm very excited about where you're going with this. Very excited about the fact that you're starting with the vision and working your way backward. One caution, or I'll just make a comment. better bus constrained messaging. When we talk about what's happening in WMATA, we talk about opportunities. We talk about fundable, feasible. But when we use the word constrained, it sounds like a negative. And I'm just saying maybe we need to find a word that says what we come up with is a great opportunity, but it's fundable and it's feasible. So just something to consider. And maybe you can help me understand why we use the word constrained. I know why we use it from a technical perspective, but sending a message to the community that we're going to have something that's better. We don't want to talk about constraints. We want to talk about the opportunities we have that are fundable and feasible.
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think we were, when we thought about it, it was, when we put out visionary, right? Then the concern was how do we get to something that we can implement? And so I think we, when we thought about it, it was the obvious word was constrained, but I absolutely take that point, and we'll go back and rethink that. I think that.
Thank you. All right. Peter, Allison, thank you so much. Obviously, a lot of work and engagement ahead. So appreciate it. Now, with no further business to stand before this committee, we'll stand adjourned, and I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Letourneau to begin the Finance and Capital Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Smedberg. Good morning and welcome to today's Finance and Capital Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our December 8th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. We have one item on our agenda this morning. We've received the general manager's proposed FY 2024 budget last month, and today the committee will vote to take that budget along with any proposed changes from the board to the public for comment. In 2 weeks, the full board will take a final vote on what the public docket will be. I just wanted to note that we set this up with this schedule to allow the committee a chance to consider any potential changes to the docket, allow for some additional public time to see what's going out on the docket before the full board will vote on finalizing the docket that will go out. Beginning in mid-February, for about 4 weeks, the public will have a chance to weigh in and tell us what they think of the proposals. During that time, the board will also take a deeper dive into the proposed operating and capital budget with work sessions. In April, we'll be presented with the feedback from the budget outreach, and we'll vote on a final FY 2024 budget, considering what we've heard from the public, our stakeholders, and what we as board members have worked on during this process. So I will turn it over to staff to begin a presentation on this item.
Good morning, Chairman Letourneau and members of the committee. My name is Yetunde Olumide, Chief Financial Officer. This morning, Mr. Webster and I are here to seek board authorization to conduct public hearings on the FY24 operating budget and 6-year capital improvement program. In summary, this proposed FY24 budget includes many initiatives critical to our customers and the region. Safety enhancements promotes the state of good repair and enables the modernization and electrification of the vehicle fleet. An improved transit network with more frequency within the central portion of the system to serve fast-growing areas with high ridership potential, provide efficient and predictable transfers, and increase job accessibility. A simpler Metro Rail fare structure for customers, a new low-income fare program that makes transit more affordable for our customers, customer service and communications improvements, including funding for a new Metro Integrated Communications Center, and sustainability projects such as the bus garage electrification. This table shows a comparison of our FY23 budget to our proposed FY24 budget. Passenger revenues will increase by approximately $105 million, primarily driven by improved ridership and fare service optimization. Non-passenger revenue will increase as well by about $22 million, again, primarily driven by increased parking, advertising, and joint development growth projects. Personnel expenses also increase by about $50 million, primarily driven by our contractual obligations, but partially offset by funding from the IIJA federal formula funding for maintenance. Non-personnel expenses will increase about $25 million, mostly driven by paratransit support, as well as higher market costs for energy. Base subsidy increases just by the 3% subsidy growth cap. Total federal ARPA relief funding is budgeted at $561 million, which is the remaining balance we expect to have available for use in FY24. While we have diligently worked towards providing a solution for balancing FY24's budget, it's imperative that we keep our focus set on FY25 as we look forward. Even though we'll balance 24, our federal relief is expected to completely be used during the FY24 fiscal year, causing a funding gap of over $700 million in FY25. Please note these initial numbers you see for FY24 are preliminary and are developed with approximately ridership looking at 75% ridership growth compared to pre-pandemic levels. And on the expense side, primarily due to contractual labor agreements. Updated FY25 estimates will be provided this fall. Now, Mr. Webster will present service and fare changes.
Thank you, Yetunde, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee and board. Briefly here, the board and committee have spent a bit of time discussing some of the service and fare proposals included in the proposed budget, but I will quickly remind of what's included. So there's an opportunity to improve frequent bus service for 3 routes. This is consistent directionally with the all-day service network that was implemented a little more than a year ago, and with the intentions of the Better Bus Network redesign project that you just heard an update on in your previous committee, all intended to deliver faster, more frequent service for customers. So the 3 routes included in the proposed budget are upgrading the frequency on the B2 running along Bladensburg Road to Anacostia to every 12-minute frequency, restructuring service on the A12 Martin Luther King Jr. Highway line and extending service to downtown Largo along Landover Road. And the 16M would be a new designation connecting Skyline to Crystal City by restructuring the existing 16G and 16H routes along Columbia Pike. On the for rail, the proposed budget includes increased rail service frequency, so the wait time between trains, with increases on the green, yellow, and orange lines, with an objective to make service more frequent, reduce travel times, expand destination access, and grow ridership. With these changes, we would be offering more frequent service all day. This would include trains arriving every 3 to 6 minutes in the core and 8 to 12 minutes or better system-wide. And compared with approximately where we are today, we'd be running about 62% more daily train trips system-wide, and about double of what was operated last July. This graphic compares Metrobus, Metrorail, and Metro Access service as it is in the FY23 budget with the FY24 budget. The proposal again includes increasing bus service on those 3 additional routes and improving green, yellow, and orange line service frequency. Next to fares. To simplify fares, the FY24 fare proposal standardizes peak and off-peak fares aligns rail and bus fares, and includes discounted fares for low-income customers. And here on this slide, you see Metro's current rather complicated fare structure on the left compared to the concept proposal structure on the right. Consolidating fare periods results in a single fare range while preserving our current late night and weekend $2 fare. Lowering the rail base fare to $2 also aligns it with the bus fare. The proposal extends the rail max fare from $6 to $6.50 and increases the changes the mileage fare to a standard 40 cents per mile after the first 3 miles. Importantly, there's also predictability and simplification benefits for Metro Access fares as the changes in peak and off-peak structure will result in more predictable Metro Access fares. So in summary, investments proposed in green and yellow line service, in orange line service frequency, and improving frequent bus service on those 3 routes that I mentioned earlier, as well as an increment for Potomac Yard Station. The fare structure simplification and the low-income fare program all net to about $17 million in budget change. On the capital improvement program, we will continue to address our capital needs, including overdue state of good repair needs. The proposed FY24 capital program anticipates about $2.3 billion of investment. In the overall 6-year capital program, about $12.4 billion. And our unconstrained 10-year outlook or 10-year plan is approximately $27 billion. The CIP, as you all know, invests in the replacement, rehabilitation, maintenance, and modernization of the rail, bus, and Metro Access systems, and is really focused on the continued safety and reliability of the system. This table displays the proposed capital budget and 6-year plan by capital investment category. So again, $2.2 billion of proposed investment forecasted for FY24, $12.4 billion over the 6-year period, with dedicated funding, debt service, and revenue loss from capital projects. Those totals are about $2.4 billion in 24 and $14.4 billion over the 6-year period. Anticipated funding sources, formula grants and match, just under $600 million for FY24. PREA grants, federal grants and match at about $292 million. System performance funding, that's additional funding from the jurisdictions, is about $177 million, $500 million from dedicated funding, and a handful of reimbursable projects. $800 million projected for debt, overall $2.4 billion in funding sources. And again, just a reminder here, our capital program, again, focused on addressing capital needs, both overdue infrastructure needs and in cyclical life cycle programs focused on the maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement of our system. Turn it back over to Yetunde.
Thank you, Tom. There we go. Each year, a critical piece of the budget process is our public engagement process, which ensures the customer's voice is included in decision-making. Our goal during the public engagement process is to educate and then gather feedback from our customers and stakeholders regarding the proposed changes. Using regional demographics and ridership data, we make extra efforts to engage customers and communities who would be most impacted by the proposals. And we do that by providing materials in multiple languages and seeking out our customers, not waiting for them to come to us. With the board's authorization of public hearings, we plan to open the public comment period in mid-February and close it in mid-March. As I mentioned earlier, we place an additional emphasis on hard-to-reach communities, such as low-income and minority customers, as well as youth and customers with disabilities. This ensures full compliance with the board-approved and FTA-required public participation plan. To reach these audiences, as well as our general ridership and stakeholders, we use a number of tactics, such as multilingual outreach teams visiting stations impacted by bus locations and other locations across the region. We use digital screens and paper signs in all rail stations, on board buses, and in Metro Access vehicles. We will place targeted digital, print, and social media advertisements as well. Customers interested in submitting their feedback have two ways to do so. Submit feedback at one of the hybrid public hearings and complete the online surveys or submit general comment through the survey tool. And finally, before we get anyone's feedback, we need to make sure our budget proposals are clearly explained and accessible in multiple languages. The primary source of budget information is wamata.com/budget, which will be fully translated in English and Spanish when it goes live next month. The site will also include a tool for customers to compare their current weekday fares with the new proposed simplified fares. Outreach teams distribute multilingual brochures and answer questions, and we provide community and government partners with toolkits of social media posts, flyers, and other information to be shared broadly across their channels. We also plan to visit community centers and speak with Metro's Youth Council about getting the word out. In the coming weeks, our communications and outreach team will prepare all of these materials, plan a robust outreach schedule, and coordinate with stakeholders and jurisdictional partners on the launch of the public comment period. We look forward to gathering feedback that will be shared with the board in April. With that, Mr. Chairman, staff seeks board authorization to conduct public hearings on the FY24 operating budget and 6-year capital improvement program. As discussed with the committee last month, Metro's budget timeline has expanded to be more transparent. The new process incorporates additional outreach to customers and stakeholders. That engagement process started in November and continues through spring with Metro's required budget hearings in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The updated timeline allows Metro to submit grant applications in May before the start of the fiscal year. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work on the budget. I think the good thing is nothing presented today is a surprise to any of us. We are well acclimated with the proposal at this point. But I will still open it up for any questions. I think the process is going to be we'll take questions on what's been presented. There is at least one amendment to the docket, which I will be offering, and I know that there is a discussion potentially about another item. So why don't we open it up at this point just for questions on this part, if there are any.
Mr. Turner, I have some questions. It's Mike Goldman here.
Yes,
You want me to raise my hand, or whether I can just speak out?
Go right ahead, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you. First, just on the scheduling of the public hearings, I saw from your last chart that you show that as sometime in February. Could you be a little more specific as to what week or what dates during a specific week you've targeted for public hearings, and when those public hearings would be scheduled for the 3 jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, and Virginia?
At this time, I believe they'll be in the second week in March.
Oh, second week in March. Because that's not what your last chart showed. It showed them in February. So is that a change that's now March?
No, I believe the chart you see shows the end of February and then activities starting thereafter toward March.
All right, if that's the interpretation. So public hearings in March, and can you be a little more specific? Which week in March?
Second week in March.
Second. Thank you. Let me just turn to the fare and service proposal, and I don't want to keep this going too long, but just for Tom, as you show on the service proposal, and the preparatory to that is, of course, you recognize that the red line is sort of the main street for Montgomery County, and I think what you're showing is that headways will be 5 to 6 minutes for most of the day on the red line, but you indicate that at some point during the day that shifts to 10-minute headways late at night. And I just want to identify what hour that is that the headways on the red line shift from 6 minutes to 10 minutes.
Mr. Goldman, appreciate the question. It's about 9:30, I believe, in the proposal.
All right, so from 6:30 a.m. until 9:30 p.m., those headways are either 5 minutes during whatever the peak hours are going to be defined as, but for all other hours, it would be no more than 6 minutes.
Until 9:30, yes.
Until 9:30, and then it would be 10 minutes from 9:30 until closing time.
Yes.
Thank you. Just final question. Your fare proposal, fare simplification proposal, provides for fare increases in two respects. The max fare would go up from $6 to $6.50, and by eliminating off-peak fares, the max fare for riders who traveled up to this point in off-peak hours would go up from $3.85 to $6.50. And I just want to confirm preliminarily whether that's the proposal.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Could you, and I don't expect you to provide this data today, but could you provide for the record for the work groups and work sessions that are being scheduled, how many riders in Montgomery County and system-wide would be impacted by those fare increases from $6 to $6.50 and from $3.85 to $6.50 for off-peak periods? And if you can estimate what the increase would be for those passengers, by those riders, by any kind of breakdown groups, if possible.
Yes.
I'm trying to get at, how many passengers of the, annual total of passengers are impacted by these max fare increases, and where the impact lies throughout the system, Montgomery County, Maryland, and system-wide.
Yes, certainly be happy to provide data on ridership, and then broken down as you're describing increase or fares today compared to what fares would be. Yes.
Right, I appreciate it. I believe some of my colleagues at the WSTC, Washington Suburban Transit Commission, are already working on that kind of a breakdown and have made some inquiries of staff for that kind of information. So I'm just raising that at a direct level with you, that we kind of get that kind of data for the work sessions being scheduled. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, I just want to add one comment in relation to the discussion about the fares. I just want to remind the audience publicly, and maybe Board Member Goldman, who's just joined, you might not be caught up on everything. Perhaps we can do a deeper dive on. We also have the low-income fare program as part of this budget proposal. So anyone that would be qualified in low-income fare program would actually be getting 50% reduction. So some people actually are going to get lower fares, even with the midday and the off-peak, if you will, and the distance. So again, it's like a matrix, and I just want to make sure we've talked about this a lot at the board, but publicly, each lever changes other levers as well. So nothing is independent on that. So I just thought I'd give a little context to that. So thank you.
And thank you, Randy. Actually, that would be a helpful additional kind of point of information if you can develop information about that line as well, and identify the historic riders who are being subject to the maximum fare, who would be eligible for these reduced rates because of income levels. I think that would certainly mitigate against the impact of the fare increase, and that would be a valuable piece of information to have in the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. I'll go to you in 1 sec. I was going to actually ask a question, which I'm going to ask now because it piggybacks on what Mr. Goldman said. So one of the frequent questions I have received thus far from my Virginia colleagues was basically, what does this mean? Similar kind of to what Mr. Goldman asked. So what I think would be helpful, and I think you've done some of this because I've seen it and I just couldn't recall it on the spot when I was being asked, would just be to provide some sort of sample trip examples, different types of trips, short trip, medium trip, longer trips, the current proposal or the current structure versus what's proposed. And then if we can also do a low income version of that, which I think for the public would help to understand what's actually changing. Because when we just sort of share, we're going from like 28 cents to 40 cents on the increment, nobody really can quantify what that means. So that would be really helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, for customers to understand what the implications are for their trip, we'll be able to share a number of sample trips and then broader data on that.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Klein.
Thank you. And I really appreciate all the work that's gone into getting us to this point. As Mr. Letourneau said, I feel like it's like our old friend, the budget, seen it a number of times and been involved in its growth. So one question, I understand that Metro Access fares are currently capped at $6.50. So it's twice the equivalent fixed route fare, but there's a cap of $6.50. That is not proposed to change in this budget, so that would stay that way?
That's correct. The base Metro Access fare and the cap would not change in this proposal.
Okay, so within the $4, which I guess is the base, and $6.50, there'll be potentially some increases for some customers, but still within that range.
There will be changes in fares. Many customers will see lower fares. Many customers will see, or some customers will see higher fares within that band.
Within that range. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then kind of piggybacking on the points Mr. Goldman raised, I think we have thus far kind of been talking about the fare simplification proposal. I've seen reports it's average 5% increase. Averages are just that, right? They're an average. I mean, within this fare proposal, there's a lot of different impacts on different types of rides. Some will see a lower fare, some will see a higher fare. And I think it's kind of time for us to start teasing out beyond the average what that looks like. And it sounds like these questions that have been asked are going to really help us to do that. A comment, I do want to say I appreciate the desire to get rid of peak period pricing. I hope that at some point, I hope that at some point we get back to the situation where peak period pricing again makes sense, because that is a situation where we have so many riders during that period that we start to need to use some pricing mechanisms to sort of address that demand. In the past, we've had peak period pricing, we have peak of the peak. I mean, this is how pricing should work to sort of manage demand in a certain way, but we're not at that point now. So I think this makes sense for where we are. And maybe at some point we do, I mean, we are starting to see crowding obviously, but we don't have the full fleet back. So once we get the full fleet back, hopefully we get riders back, everybody will get back to a situation where we may want to think about some type of peak something again. But I see that we're not there now. I also do think we may have constrained ourselves a little too much in the proposal. We being the board, the general manager has to put forward a budget with decisions in it, right? You can't be like, we might do this, we might do that. It has to balance, it has to be a proposal. But the board can actually consider other things, and I think the public can consider other things. And as Mr. Letourneau mentioned, I've been considering, should we expand the public docket a little to add some additional options for the public to consider? As Mr. Goldman mentioned, we've proposed, the general manager has proposed increasing the max fare. The proposal changes the distance-based fare. It actually changes the base fare to match the off-peak base fare today. I worry a little bit that we're constraining optionality, that we are moving other levers and not allowing ourselves to consider moving that one, the base fare. However, from today's discussion, as the general manager said, it's all a matrix. moving one piece affects this, affects that. There's a low-income fare discount, there's changing the peak, off-peak, this and that. There are impacts for all of these things. Ultimately, the whole package will have to satisfy Title VI requirements. So I'm not going to offer an amendment today to add stuff to the docket, but I would like us to continue this discussion so that before the docket is finalized in 2 weeks, we can have a better understanding of whether adding some things to the docket is going to totally throw off the whole package so that we no longer achieve the goals of fare simplification and Title VI, or if there might be some other options that the public could consider, such as going to the peak base fare as opposed to the off-peak base fare overall for Metro Rail. That was a lot of words. I understand that. I'm not sure if I was totally clear on all of that, but I really would like to follow up with you and other board members over the next 2 weeks and figure out if maybe there are any other options that we would like to get public comment on.
So just to be clear on what you're asking then,
yes,
to make sure it is, you would like to see analysis of a base fare up to 225?
Yeah, let me put it in, yes, thank you. I'll be more specific. So currently the peak base fare is $2.25. The proposal sets the base fare at $2, which is the off-peak. I would like to see what the impact would be of a base fare of $2.25 up to, I think the way the public docket works, right, is up to, because I think it's important for folks to understand, like, ultimately we can decide, all of us, to do anything kind of within the bounds. The docket is the outer bounds of what we can do. So we say, base fare of $2.25 in the docket, we could do $2.10 or $2 or anything under $2.25, right?
Yes, with increments that arithmetically make sense. So if you increase the base, then the 40 cents is on top of that. So we would want to be sensitive to the changes. But yes.
Right. Okay. So, but if the 40 cents could, just to carry this out, the 40 cents could go down ultimately, but not up, right?
Yes. If a distance charge of 40 cents were advertised in public hearing, yes, it could go down. It couldn't go up.
Right. Okay. So that's my basic thing. Like, we're setting our outer bounds by what's in the public docket. Let's make sure the outer bounds give us enough room to address whatever we hear back from the public. So I would like to see some analysis of a $2.25 base fare going out with the package, how that would impact Title VI, what other levers we might need to pull to make the whole package make sense. Is that clear enough?
It is, and just want to make sure, if that were to be offered as amendment, it would be appropriate to do so in 2 weeks, and we don't need to do that today. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Smeber asked you first, and then I'll go to Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. So we have the 11Y issue, but we can deal with that in 2 weeks as well.
No, I'm going to offer an amendment once I make
okay.
the motion on the authorization.
Okay, so Tom, question for you. Speaking of old friends, your slide 17, addressing overdue capital needs. Not today, but at some point, engagement with our partners. And do you have a timeline for this already, I assume? I know since August we've been getting a lot better at this and communicating this and planning for this. So is there a timeline for this? Particularly the 3 projects there need to do more to catch up. 2 years, 5 years, 25 years.
Certainly, we can provide more detail on the schedule for the projects and our projections of addressing overdue needs. And again, a reminder. Reinvestment in the system is an ongoing forever. There will be project completions that address overdue needs, but a continuing and ongoing need to reinvest in major projects. But certainly we happy to share more detail on specific projects and that outlook.
Yeah, and obviously the financial impact, but also important, the communicating out to folks, and particularly our riders, because these things in the past have not been executed in timing.
So, Chair, maybe I can add a comment to that. In the board meeting 2 weeks from now, I believe Andy will be doing an update on basically 2023 diversions and limited shutdowns for what I would classify almost all those as state of good repair, maybe a tad bit of modernization into those, but mostly state of good repair. Next month, the team is prepared, and we want to have a conversation with Finance Chair Paterno, spending a very significant amount of time on capital planning for the financial workshop, and really laying out what we have money for over the next 6 to 10 years, and where we do not have funding, and that's not just the state of good repair, which is Tom is referring to, which is forever, not as maybe as significant as it's been in the last 7 years, obviously, because that was very big, but the modernization of this organization, which we've talked about. So there's mitigation, as Board Member Klein mentioned, mitigation on getting people with fares to move. The other mitigation is run a lot more trains, right? We want to get to a point where we're running frequency to the highest level possible, which is a world-class system. We want to think about platform screen doors and open gangway trains and fully zero-emission fleet as fast as we can get there, fully LEED certified buildings, communication space train control. We have a lot of modernization that we have to do to become that agency that would be equivalent to every other national capital in the world of the biggest countries. So we want to really start framing that conversation out so people can see that delta, and we would propose to be ready to do that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Dr. Lowe?
Yeah, it is wonderful that this feels like an old friend, but amending it changes that. So I just want to caution this whole board that as we think about what optionality we really need on the table, like my personal take would be that if we're going to try to build on the conversations that we've already had as a board and revisit the base fare idea, that to me reopens the conversation about the max fare as well. And so let's talk about it, but time is limited and we have already spent quite a bit of time talking prior to the general manager's proposal. And I just want to thank the general manager also, because I appreciate so much like the difference that I feel in having a budget proposed that is something that I can actually really understand the levers that we're pulling on because of how much we talked about this in advance. And I really value the consensus that we built in those conversations as well. I think that the context for me, just to forecast for the public what we're thinking about as we approach this budget, is that WMATA has not raised fares in 5 years. A lot has happened in the last 5 years, including a huge amount of inflation that's impacting all of us, but is certainly impacting WMATA. And we already heard about how that's impacting us in terms of like the cost of energy, for example. So, I think we need to be realistic that, like, of course, we're talking about costs are going up, fares are going to go up. And we need to figure out how to pay for this system and have a balanced budget. So it's definitely happening. We're working to tool exactly what it's going to look like, but it's definitely happening, and it's simply a question of figuring out what's the most reasonable way for it to happen.
Okay, any further questions before I put this on the floor? Seeing none, I will move the committee approval of the resolution to authorize for public hearings on proposed FY24 operating budget, FY24 capital budget, FY24 to 29 capital improvement program, together with Title VI equity analysis and public participation on service and fare changes. Is there a second? Committee member.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Klein. So there is one amendment which was just distributed, and I apologize it wasn't distributed earlier. We've been working with, Chairman Smedberg and I have been working with the City of Alexandria primarily regarding a change to the 11 service serving Mount Vernon. I believe that staff has done some analysis on potential costs. And Mr. Webster, I think we're talking about something, I believe I saw last night, in the order of magnitude of around $300,000. It wasn't a dramatic cost, but it's sort of changing the service. So in order for the board to be able to consider this change as part of the budget, we are asking that it be included in the public docket for further analysis and discussion and input from Alexandria, and particularly in Fairfax County. And so I would offer the amendment. I move to amend the resolution authorization for public hearings on proposed FY24 operating budget, FY24 capital budget, FY24-29 capital improvement program, together with Title VI equity analysis and public participation on service and fare changes as follows. Attachment C is amended by adding a new item 5 under Metrobus service changes to read as follows. 11Y Mount Vernon Express line, eliminate the 11C Mount Vernon line, improve service frequency on the 11Y Mount Vernon Express line to either of the two proposals. And there are two proposals, option 1 and option 2, that are provided. Option 1 with 30-minute service frequency, option 2 with 24-minute frequency with various start times included. Is there a second from a member of the committee on that amendment? Second. Not the amendment.
Okay.
Okay.
That too.
Seconded by Ms. Klein. Thank you. Any discussion on that amendment? Mr. Smedberg, is there anything you want to offer since you've been with me?
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate the staff working with the County of Fairfax and the City of Alexandria on this. And obviously there is an elimination of some service as well. It's not just a
it's essentially swapping.
Yeah, swapping out.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to abstain on this, just to tell you in advance, since this is the first time I've seen it, and since my role this morning is as a designated pinch hitter for Secretary Ports, and I obviously have not had an opportunity to consult with him on what the state of Maryland would think about this change. I'm just going to abstain, so I just want to let you know that, and it doesn't reflect any position pro or con on the merits of your proposed amendment.
Right. Appreciate that, Mr. Goldman. So we will vote first on the amendments. Okay, the Secretary will call the roll.
Chair Letourneau?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Mr. Goldman?
Abstain.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And then do we need to also vote on adoption of the main motion as amended? Any further discussion on the underlying motion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Chair Letourneau?
Aye.
Ms. Babers?
Aye.
Mr. Goldman?
Aye.
Ms. Klein? The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to discussion in 2 weeks. With no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned, and I will turn it back to Chairman Smedberg for a special board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg, Chair of the WMATA Board. Since we called the roll at the beginning of today's first meeting, we'll move right ahead to the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections to the agenda as presented, hearing none, we'll approve the agenda as presented. We have just one item on today's agenda to authorize a public hearing for the Strategic Transformation Plan, Your Metro, the Way Forward. I therefore move that the Board of Directors approve staff's request to authorize a public hearing for the strategic plan. Is there a second? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. Any further discussion or comments on the proposal? Hearing none. Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Mr. Goldman?
Aye.
Ms. Klein?
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Dr. Lowe?
Aye.
Mr. Drummer?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. With no further business to come before the board, we will stand adjourned. I'll move that we meet in executive session. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions and/or the federal government. And C, personnel or labor issues, including discussion of labor contracts or labor negotiations, consideration of or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. And D, contractual or other matters involving confidential or proprietary concerns or the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interest of WMATA. And F, public safety and security matters where premature release would compromise public safety. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Lowe. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. And if the board could stay up front here, we're going to gather and, oh, okay, we'll just gather by the front desk.